The Missouri River had receded by the second week of April, which meant that the county roads along the river bottomland were in the condition they were always in after the river receded. Soft on top, softer below, and carrying the particular confidence of ground that looks firm until you put something heavy on it. Captain Roy Decker of the Callaway County Fire Department knew this. He had driven these roads in wet springs before. What he had not done before, or not done recently enough for the lesson to hold, was drive the pumper truck, a 1961 International chassis with a full water tank and pump assembly, 16,000 pounds of equipment and water combined, down the county road that ran along the floodplain of the Oxves Creek tributary at 40 miles an hour in the direction of the Whitfield farm, which had been burning for 14 minutes when the call came in. The road looked solid. It was not. The right front wheel found the soft shoulder first, at the county road curve 2 miles south of the Whitfield farm. The truck drifted right. Decker corrected. The front came back, but the correction had put the rear wheels over the line between the paved surface and the clay shoulder, and 16,000 pounds of fire truck does not negotiate with post-flood clay. The rear duals went through the surface layer and through the partially saturated layer beneath it and stopped when they hit the substrate, which was 18 inches down, which was deep enough to bury the axle housings and put the differential in the mud. Decker tried forward. The duals spun. He tried reverse. The duals spun in the other direction. He killed the engine and climbed out and stood in the Missouri clay and looked at his truck. The Whitfield farm was 2 miles north. The smoke was visible above the tree line from where he stood. The crew tried everything they had. They tried planking, pulling boards from the truck's equipment bay, and sliding them under the rear tires. The first set of boards went into the clay like paper into water. They tried a heavier set, from a fence post along the road shoulder. Those held for one wheel rotation and then sank. They tried a winch cable to a fence post 40 feet back. The post pulled clean out of the saturated ground before the winch had taken up half its cable length. They tried rocking forward and reverse in alternating sequence, trying to find purchase between the churned mud and what might still be intact below it. Each sequence dug the rear duals deeper. By the fourth attempt, the differential housing was 6 inches from the clay surface. 31 minutes after the call came in, the Whitfield farmhouse fire had been burning for 45 minutes, and the pumper truck had not moved in any useful direction. That was when Cecil Boone pulled up on the Model B. If you've ever watched a man with one tool solve what a team with all the tools couldn't, subscribe to this channel. A new story like this one every week, and none of them end the way the experts expected. Let me tell you about Cecil Boone, because the way he arrived tells you everything you need to know about him. He came from the south from his farm, which ran along the east side of the county road for about half a mile. He had been in his machine shed when the pumper went past at speed 22 minutes earlier, and he had heard it go past and had thought nothing of it, because fire trucks go past at speed, and that is their business. But he had also heard, some minutes later, the sound of the engine straining and the wheels spinning, and had walked to the edge of his machine shed yard and looked south and seen the truck in the shoulder, and understood immediately what had happened. He had gone back to the shed and hitched the chain to the drawbar. He was 71 years old, and he had farmed the floodplain ground along the Oxves Creek tributary since 1938. He had farmed it in wet springs and dry summers and everything in between. He had worked it with draft horses until 1949, and with the John Deere Model B from 1956 onward. And the reason he had chosen the Model B over the other machines available to him at the time was the same reason he had always made decisions about equipment, because it was the right tool for the specific ground he was farming. The specific ground he was farming was floodplain. Floodplain ground has a bearing capacity that changes with the season. In summer and fall, it is dense and reliable. In April, after the river has deposited its season's worth of silt on top of the previous year's silt, and the water table is still within a foot of the surface, it has a bearing capacity that will support a man walking and a light tractor and very little else. Cecil had learned this in 1938 with draft horses. He had relearned it in 1949 with a borrowed tractor that went in on the south end of his bottom ground and required 2 days to extract. He had chosen the Model B specifically because the wide rear tires distributed the tractor's weight, 2,900 pounds, across a contact area that kept it below the floodplain spring bearing capacity. He knew exactly what had happened to the pumper truck. He had watched it happen to other machines in his bottom ground for 25 years. He also knew exactly what needed to happen to fix it. The 1952 John Deere Model B was the smaller sibling of the Model A and the Model G, shorter, lighter, narrower in the frame rails, but carrying the same fundamental design philosophy in its engine. The horizontal two-cylinder lay flat between the frame rails, the massive cast-iron flywheel turning at the rear, the engine producing its torque at the bottom of its RPM range, without the high-revving urgency of the modern diesel tractors that had begun to populate Callaway County's farmsteads. Cecil had bought it used in 1956 from a neighbor who was upgrading, and he had put the widest rear tire option available for the Model B on it before he ever used it on the bottom ground, because the math of weight and contact area was not complicated, and he had been doing it with draft horses for 11 years before he had a tractor. Ground pressure equals weight divided by contact area. The pumper truck weighed 16,000 pounds. Its rear dual tires, substantial tires, the right size for a road vehicle of that weight, put approximately 200 square inches of rubber on the ground between the two rear axles. Ground pressure, 80 pounds per square inch. Post-flood Oxvas Creek tributary clay in April had a bearing capacity of perhaps 15 to 20 pounds per square inch. The pumper had been asking the ground for 4 times what it could give. The Model B weighed 2,900 pounds. Its wide rear tires, the widest available for the B, fitted specifically for this ground, produced approximately 240 square inches of contact area. Ground pressure, 12 pounds per square inch, below the bearing capacity of even the worst April flood plain clay Cecil had farmed. This was the number that mattered, not horsepower, not the weight capacity of the winch, not the tensile strength of the fence post they had yanked out of the ground. 12 pounds per square inch. Captain Decker did not know this number. He knew fire trucks and water systems and emergency protocols and the roads of Callaway County in most conditions. He did not know what Cecil knew, which was what the specific clay of the Oxvas Creek floodplain gave up and what it held onto, and how to tell the difference from the surface without digging. When Cecil pulled up to the stuck pumper on the Model B, Decker looked at the tractor the way a man looks at a proposed solution that doesn't make geometric sense. "That thing won't move a fire truck," Decker said. Cecil climbed down from the seat and walked to the rear of the pumper. He looked at the angle it had entered the soft shoulder. He looked at the depth on each side. The right rear wheel was 6 inches deeper in the clay than the left rear. He walked to the clay beside the buried right wheel and pressed his hand flat into it, the way he pressed the bottom ground every spring to assess what it was willing to give. He stood up and walked back to the tractor. "It's deeper on the right," Cecil said. "I'll pull from the left. The right side will come free first and the truck will rotate toward the road. Don't try to drive it straight back. Let it rotate." Decker looked at him. Then he looked at the smoke above the tree line 2 miles north, which had been there for 45 minutes now. "All right," Decker said. What Cecil did in the next 18 minutes was not complicated. That was the point. He drove the Model B past the pumper, staying on the firm edge of the paved road surface, his wide tires exactly at the boundary between the road and the soft shoulder, pressing without penetrating. He positioned the tractor so the chain would run at a diagonal angle of roughly 20 degrees off the straight rear axis of the pumper, pulling from the left side of the road toward the truck's right rear corner. He walked the chain through the clay to the left rear frame rail of the pumper and hooked it at a point low on the frame, not the standard recovery hook on the rear bumper, which would have pulled straight back against both sides of the buried vehicle simultaneously, but a point that would translate the angular pull into rotational force, swinging the truck's rear end toward the firmer road surface instead of fighting the suction on both sides at once. He walked back to the Model B. He climbed up. He set the throttle. Pop, pop, pop. The engine found its load the way it always found its load, without drama, at low RPM, the flywheel storing each combustion stroke and releasing it as a continuous, even pressure that arrived at the chain without peaks or gaps. The wide rear tires pressed into the firm clay at the road edge and did not move through it. They held. The chain went taut. Decker stood 20 feet back with his arms crossed. The smoke above the tree line had not gotten smaller. For 3 minutes, the pumper didn't move. Then the clay on the right side of the buried right wheel made the sound that Cecil had heard it make before, in his bottom ground, when a tractor or a piece of equipment had gone in, and he had done this same thing to get it out. A low, wet release. A vacuum deciding to give up. The right rear wheel rotated 1 inch toward the road. Then 2. Then the pumper's rear end was swinging slowly, following the geometry of the diagonal pull, its right side rising slightly as the suction broke, the left side still deeper but now rotating rather than resisting, the whole vehicle doing what vehicles do when you stop fighting their weight and start using their geometry. Pop, pop, pop. The engine cadence did not change. The wide rear tires did not spin. The chain did not jerk or snap. It simply pulled continuously at 12 pounds per square inch, which was what the ground could hold. 14 minutes in, the pumper's rear right wheel was on firm road surface. 16 minutes in, both rear wheels were clear of the soft shoulder. 18 minutes after Cecil had set the chain, the pumper was on solid road. Decker was in the cab before the dust settled, starting the engine, pulling onto the county road toward the Whitfield farm. Cecil unhooked the chain and began coiling it. The Whitfield farm fire had been burning for 63 minutes when the pumper arrived. Walter Whitfield, 74 years old, had gotten himself and his wife Clara out of the farmhouse in the first 5 minutes. The house itself was lost before the pumper arrived. The fire had been in the kitchen walls and moved to the attic before anyone knew it was there. But the barn, which was attached to the house by a covered passage, had not yet caught fully. The pumper crew put 3 lines on the barn and held it. The equipment inside, a nearly new combine, 2 tractors, a grain drill, survived. The margin between the barn going and the barn holding was 4 minutes. The pumper arrived 4 minutes before the fire would have established in the barn's east wall. Cecil had freed the pumper in 18 minutes. If he had not been there, or if he had been there and taken 30 minutes, or if Decker had not listened when Cecil told him to let the truck rotate rather than drive it straight back, the margin would not have existed. Cecil drove home on the Model B when the pumper pulled out. He did not stay to watch the fire operation. He had chores in the afternoon. Captain Roy Decker stopped at Cecil's farm on his way back to the station that evening. Cecil was in the machine shed when Decker pulled up. He was cleaning the chain he had used that afternoon, coiling it in the methodical way he coiled all chain, the same length per loop, every time. Decker stood in the shed doorway. "I owe you an apology," Decker said. Cecil kept coiling. "No, you don't. I said the tractor wouldn't move the truck." "You were thinking about horsepower," Cecil said. "The problem wasn't horsepower." Decker was quiet for a moment. Then, what was the problem? "Ground pressure," Cecil said. He explained it the way he would have explained it to anyone who asked directly, without condescension, The way a man explains something he has known for 25 years to someone who has reason to know it now. Weight divided by contact area. The bearing capacity of post-flood clay. Why the wide tires held where the narrow ones sank. Decker took a small notebook out of his jacket pocket and wrote it down. Not the formula, the principle. The way you look at stuck equipment and think about what the ground is actually being asked to do instead of what the machine is being asked to pull. We should have known this, Decker said. Maybe, Cecil said. He hung the coiled chain on the wall hook. Most people don't farm flood plain. Decker nodded. He started to leave, then turned back. The Whitfield barn, he said. We held it. I heard, Cecil said. 4-minute margin. Cecil didn't say anything. I'll remember that, Decker said. Good, Cecil said. In the spring of 1964, Callaway County added one line to its equipment inventory. John Deere Model B tractor, purchased for flood season operations, soft ground recovery. The decision was made at a county equipment committee meeting in February of that year, on the recommendation of Captain Roy Decker, who had attended the meeting with a page of notes in his handwriting and the specific language he wanted in the inventory record, which was language that explained not just what the tractor was for but why it worked. Ground pressure, wide tires, low RPM, the specific bearing capacity of post-flood Missouri clay. The committee approved the purchase without significant debate. The tractor they bought was a used Model B. The county paid $420 for it. It sat in the county equipment yard for most of the year. In April and May, when the river receded and the roads went soft, it was the most useful piece of equipment the county owned. Cecil Boone farmed his floodplain ground until 1979, when his knees made the open seat work impractical and his son Howard took over the operation. Cecil asked one thing of the transition: the Model B stays. Howard kept it. He put the same wide rear tires on it that Cecil had specified in 1956, because Cecil had explained why, and the explanation had the ring of something that does not stop being true because the years pass. Pop, pop, pop. 2 cylinders, 12 pounds per square inch, 18 minutes. The pumper truck made it to the Whitfield farm with 4 minutes to spare. That is what it looks like when the right tool understands the ground, and the man running it understands the tool. Captain Decker wrote it down. Some lessons are worth keeping in a notebook. Some are worth putting in the county equipment inventory in February, in the cold, at a committee meeting where nobody expects the most important line to be about a used John Deere. The 2-cylinder era at John Deere ended officially in 1960. The new machines were more powerful, more capable, better suited for the agriculture that was coming. That is true. But post-flood Missouri clay in April does not care what year it is. It cares about ground pressure. And ground pressure has been 12 pounds per square inch on the Model B's wide rear tires since 1956, and it will be 12 pounds per square inch tomorrow. And that number has never needed to be updated, because physics does not release new versions. Pop, pop, pop. 2 cylinders, low and slow, holding where everything else went through.